that's not even the line. How long is this going to take you? You're the reason.
Hello, this is the Journey Told podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Zanotti. I believe life is about the journey, not the destination. To find the journey in every step of the road, the highs, the lows, the ups and downs, the twists and turns. It's in those moments that make life so beautiful. Our guest today has a journey of his own. Peter Meyer is the writer and director of The Boy from the Wild, a documentary and novel about the Carkaloof Valley Nature Reserve, a hidden wilderness gem situated in the hilly countryside of KwaZulu-Natal. The documentary focuses on conservation, family, relationship between animals and humans, and tells the story of Peter, who grew up in a very fun, unconventional environment. Peter, I thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and really appreciate it. Lovely to have people all the way from LA listening in to something on the other side of the world. And I love your statement. You're absolutely right. It is always about the journey, never the end result.
It's about the journey. Let's talk about your journey. Tell me, if you will, about this book, about the documentary. I want to dive into your mindset.
Well, the simplicity of it's really a tribute for my father. My father created a very unique project in South Africa that was very strong towards the conservation movement, and in a period back in the 80s when people weren't really talking about it as much as they are today. So he was very much kind of ahead of his time, and when he passed, it was a story that we hadn't really told to too many people, quite simply because we wanted to stay humble about it and not really sort of show off what it was about. But when he passed, I felt that it was a time to share what he set up, the life that I was able to live, but more importantly, the lessons that we were able to learn from it. And I did the book, which was encouraged by Liam Neeson. Actually, we were on a set together and told him the story, and he really thought it was worthwhile putting it out there, and went and did it, got a ghostwriter, and then thought I'd put a visual together for the audience to see what it looked like, and we made a little cute documentary, which is really, it's all very much a tribute for my dad more than anything. And it's lovely to see that people are enjoying the story.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what that story is? Tell us a little bit about your dad and what you're focusing on.
Well, I grew up on a game reserve, or safari, as some people like to call it, in South Africa. And it was a place that was very, very beautiful in itself. But my father had this mission of taking the animals out of captivity from around the world and putting them back into the wild. And at that time, it was a very unconventional, a story that was, impossible in some ways to achieve. And he was the guy that, really had the mindset to do it. He had the love. He luckily had the finances. He was a successful businessman, but he put it all towards conservation. And I was really the lucky kid that got to be able to enjoy those experiences, living with wild animals, being on different adventures on a daily basis, learning different kind of lessons that you wouldn't typically learn in, I consider, the real world. It was a very different kind of upbringing for me. And I had a father that gave a lot of wisdom, gave a lot of love, but also a lot of, good experiences, and gave a lot back to the community, both, animals and humans, really. So I was just very fortunate to live in a beautiful place that was created by him.
Do you believe in, now that your father has passed away, and again, I'm mentioning this coming from a place of both my parents have passed away too. So to me, it's okay. But I say that to say that I do feel that there's a transformation of what happens once you lose a parent, and how you have to possibly really learn to adjust in the world a little bit different. That's my opinion. Do you do you share that same sentiment? And if not, can you tell us what it's been like for you dealing with the loss of your father and how you learned how to move on through the grief?
Yeah, I mean, I think losing any parent is tough. And I mean, harder for you in your case because you've lost both. And I feel for you because I nearly lost my mum not too long ago as well, actually. My sort of, feelings towards it were really a sense of emptiness more than anything. I think you feel the void that is very different. Losing someone's tragic, but losing a parent is very tough. It's someone who connects with another, they go through all that love and emotion, they bring you into this world, that there's a different kind of connection that you would have compared to somebody else. And I think, when you lose something like that, and particularly in my case, someone who was, a best friend, someone who gave a lot of wisdom, the one that I would often go to for advice, it was very, very challenging. But I think the biggest thing that I learned is more about time. Time becomes so incredibly precious. And I think it's something that we take very much for granted on a regular basis. More so, before we lose a family member. I think when you lose someone, you realize that clock is ticking. And there's an expression that everyone kind of says, oh, time's so short, or, wow, it's flown by, and it's very easy to look back in hindsight. But for me, I've always said time is unknown. You never know when it's going to stop. That clock could stop tomorrow for me. It could stop for somebody else. You just have no clue. And I think losing my dad really gave me the emphasis of live life to the full, and I was very lucky to be doing that. But I think more on a level of do something that's good for you, do something that's good for others. Don't follow the same rule path that everyone else says you have to do something you love. And I think that's very kind of strong for me after losing my dad. That message was very, very, very powerful.
So I read that the head of Disney and National Geographic for India and Far East suggested that your book would become a huge success, and actually suggested that you make it into a documentary. What did that conversation do for you? Was it the push that you needed to jump and actually do what you did and create this and get it out there?
Very, very much so. I think it's the book and the film were based on two sort of very bizarre coincidences. The first one for the book, which came first, I was on the film set just as a tiny little role alongside Liam Neeson in something called The Commuter. And in between sort of takes, we'd have chats and this, that, and the other. And he was the one who encouraged me to do the book. And I needed that anyway, because I think it was something that I didn't know if I needed to step out, if I should do it. And, when I realized the interest from him was there, I thought, no, okay, let's go for it. It was when I was in South Africa that I said to myself, I always wanted to go back, revisit the place. And I'd had in mind a little project called Returning Home a Boy. And it was because I left as a boy. And I think it's taking you back to your roots, that you always remember some of the best times when you're a kid. You're free, you don't have the responsibilities of life, you're completely at one, it's pure. And I was trying to go for something like that and create a visual journey for people, that they were able to see what the book was about, what the place was like. And it just so happened that the head of National Geographic and Disney for India and the Far East was staying there as a guest when we went back to film.
Yeah.
And I showed him the book, I was telling him the story, showed him some footage of what we were doing. And he, a little bit like Liam, was like, wow, this is such a cool story. I had no idea that I was staying here. And it made his stay at the place completely different. And I think it was like his 4th or 5th visit. So when he gave that encouragement, I thought, wow, there's influential people that are finding a story interesting from a genuine perspective, not necessarily from a financial. It was purely about, wow, that's a great story. For me, that was encouragement to go forward with it. It was also a way to somehow keep my dad alive in a weird kind of a way. It keeps his legacy strong. And I thought, those little moments really help you along your journey. And it's always about the people in life, and if you can get that kind of structural belief or influence from others, I think that can really help someone move forward. And it certainly did for me. I was very lucky again.
So now comes the documentary release. How do you hope the world receives your work?
I hope that they kind of see it for the beauty of what the wild is all about. I think from the visual perspective, it's a really lovely, small, creative little piece of something that is just stunning and a really nice story. Often there's a lot of tragedy, and I think we wanted to bring something that was quite a positive light. And I think certainly in a time where conservation has been hit very heavily through poaching and everything else like that, I hope that people can see it for the sake of what conservation actually means and how something with long-term planning can really make a difference. The other is, I hope people realize that, there's a message for a connection between wildlife. And I think this is something that I wanted to talk about, which is quite different. I was very lucky to have lived in the environment that I did, but I think I was almost luckier to have learned the lessons that I did. I think that's something that you don't always get from going somewhere for a short period of time. It's very easy to kind of look at a picture and say one thing, but not know what it is in between. And I think having those lessons and trying to portray that into the documentary to say that, there's not that much difference between the wild and humans were wild once, and we still are in many respects. It's understanding, a lion and a rhino is no different in some respects. It's learning respect and patience and understanding. And I wanted to bring that into the documentary. And the other is family, whether you are lucky enough to still have your parents or not, or whether you've had, a father figure, a mother figure, or someone influential in your life. It's important to stop and say thank you and show appreciation, even if they are still here. Another thing, I'm sorry for you with your parents, but when you lose somebody, we often find that at funerals or afterwards, we tend to say the things that we should have said before.
Yes.
It's a horrible thing in some ways. And I think I try and encourage people to say thank you, or forgive, or maybe not forget, sure, but try and forgive, because again, when that clock stops, you have no chance to say it to them. And I think that the documentary's got a little bit of emotion with regards to that aspect. So I hope that people can kind of take those messages of understanding what conservation is about, understanding how humans and wildlife are very closely connected, and the importance of family.
Oh, I love that. Can you dive into your mindset a bit? Take us in the mindset of you as the writer. What are your practices like? How do you mentally clear and prepare for the work ahead?
Be focused. I think keep focused on the dream. Keep focused on why you wanted to do something in the beginning. I'm a terrible writer, but I'm a great creator in my mind. I could kind of see the aspect really, really nicely. And I think if you've got the right support, I found the right writer to put the book together in a ghostwriter. I kept the creativity. I think you've got to keep yourself grounded and focused, keep a good business plan to what's needed. And at the same point, enjoy it. Don't be afraid to make some mistakes along the way. It only makes you stronger. And, my dad always said it's only a mistake if you make the same mistake twice. It's a learning lesson, the first one. And I think these are the little things. If you keep focused on that, you'll go the right direction and you'll achieve what you need to.
Can you complete this sentence for me? Life is a blank of blank.
Life is a journey filled with experiences.
Oh, I love it. And those experiences can take you
any way you want if you believe in it.
That's why I enjoy talking to creatives, because I can just throw something out there and you just get it.
It's nice, but it's different. It's different.
Yeah.
It's great questions. I love the passion and emotion in it. Very different.
What advice do you give our viewers and listeners who want to write, but they don't even know where to possibly begin? How do they get started? And what do you suggest that they do to actually stay centered?
The bizarre thing for me is I've got a book, but in reality, I live my life on essentially 2 pages, the things I have done and the things I haven't done. And I try and make sure the things I have done are full compared to the things that I haven't done. I don't like to live life with regrets, especially the regret of like, I wish I did that or whatever. There's I don't think it's my father's saying, but I've heard it from my father. But the expression of never be placed into your grave, but slide into it with bumps and bruises. I live my 2 pages exactly like that. And I think if you're trying to get into writing, trying to get into creativity, whatever it might be, follow 2 simple pages of the things you want, the things you don't want, and focus on the things that you've written down. And hopefully the page of what you don't want is a lot smaller. That way you can start to create a pattern, a trail, a path of where that journey can start and finish. And, the simplest thing as well, turn on some music, have a drink, have a bath, take your mind somewhere else, whatever it might be, climb a mountain if you have to kind of clear your mind and talk to yourself, find little things that can just make you start that first page of any kind of chapter of whatever that topic's going to be about, and just roll with it. And at some point, burn the page, because you'll automatically remember it, and it will, those flames will kind of create something completely different. So, don't be afraid just to go with the flow,
Oh, I love that. I go with the flow all the time. I literally just flow through my day and flow through life. Truthfully, that's how I maneuver. Do you goal set? Do you vision board? What is your visual? What is your goal routine, if you have one?
No, I mean, I think we do. I'm in a new one over here. I've just opened up a high-end photography studio here in London. And again, I had goals of not about creating the best pictures, or being the best, most unique kind of studio in London. I focused on a goal of changing people's lives, because it's something that you can say, we're going to do this because if they get something great out of it, they might get a better chance with an agency, or the right kind of, shot for a book shot, or a LinkedIn, or whatever the individual wants. If you find a goal and kind of focus on the things that will make those differences, it's never about the products, it's often about the service. And again, the book is the product, but the service is everything within it. You got to find the best way to deliver. No one goes to the hotel and says, wow, it's pretty. Everyone goes, oh my gosh, the service was incredible, the food was nice, whatever. You've got to find something that you can create a goal that's going to give a different perspective than just the end result. I think you've got to realize, the things that really matter, and then focus on those and put them, and be realistic. It's easy to have the dream, but you've got to keep a realistic dream. You ain't going to get to the moon without a rocket, and the rocket's going to need some fuel, and the fuel's got to be made somewhere before it can get to you. You've got to keep that kind of track and, reality, keep your feet on the ground as well, but it will come. If you really believe in it, it will come.
So to that point, do you kind of characterize yourself or your goals in small steps as opposed to big, large goals as you're moving through what you need to accomplish?
I think I've always had the big goals, but then you need to create the smaller ones in order to get there. I remember when I didn't plan to get into film. It happened after my father passed. Someone asked me to do one thing, and I could see potentially where you could go. But I knew that there were a lot of steps in between that needed to be done. So I always keep track of where I want to be, but know the path that might have 3 or 4 different roads before you get to that end result. You've got to keep smart about where you want to be. Particularly here in the studio, you'll sometimes get some people that are incredibly beautiful and think, wow, they could be great models, or they could be great actors, but no one has the mindset to say, well, actually fine, but you've got to set up this, you've got to set up this, you've got to set up this before you get there. Sometimes people lose track of the reality and the focus of how do you get from A to B, then B to C, because it's easy to see Z at the very end of it, but you still got everything else to get through. And I think you've got to make sure that you keep the big goal in mind, but always set the little ones in between, because it's like a baby step. You've got to learn to crawl before you can even stand, let alone walk. So, most people tend to focus on running. It really doesn't happen. You've got to be realistic.
Do you have a strong support system, mentors, or do you do spiritual, or kind of what does your circle look like?
Little bit different, to be fair. I mean, I've always had strong faith in my father, especially. I think not having him has been a lot harder, but also made me a lot stronger to believe in my decisions. I think I'd always kind of like give that phone call and say, hey dad, what do you think about this? Now I've got to learn to do that for myself. Certainly there's some great friends or companions that might, you might want to read a couple of ideas off to them and see what they think, and try and find the best support system. I think even here at the studio, I might have had the vision, but it's my team that really makes the place good, and it's having the right people around you to make that happen. A lot of the time I'm quite stubborn in where I want to go. And I think I've, right or wrong, I've normally been on the better side of right than I have been on wrong. So I keep my confidence as strong as I can to achieve what I want, but I'll take advice. And I think I've always got to remain humble to other people's opinions, because sometimes they could be better. And it could help me get to where I want to go. So the people are important around me, but I've always got to make sure I keep my beliefs stronger than anything else, because you don't want to have people take away your ideas or your dreams, or lose track of where you want to go. So find the right people, but be confident within yourself.
I love it. And confidence. I would like to end with a segment that I'm playing off the word show and tell, which we're calling tell and tell. What can you tell us that deeply impacted you that no one knows about? Something that you're open to sharing with the world, a secret, if you will. I would love for you to talk about what's your secret to keeping your mindset strong. But you can answer that or answer whatever you may decide to answer for that question.
Wow, that's your questions have been phenomenal. That's very deep. I mean, it really would have to probably be my dad, and I'm sorry if I keep bringing the same thing up. I think it was the hardest thing losing him, and I think one of the biggest moments My dad passed in my arms with my mum. And it was one of the hardest things I remember feeling. Literally, it's not about the last breath. I literally felt his last pulse. And I think that was the most like intense moment I could ever feel. And I was trying so hard not to cry because my mum was there and I promised my father I was going to stay strong. That moment gave so much perspective on life. I mean, I was top of my game in hotels. I was opening hotels around the world. I was ambitious. I was, the big salaries, and nothing mattered after that. The reality of love, family, the real important things of life, just came flooding down in so many different regards. And I think that last pulse from, somebody brought me into this world and I was there to help take them out, changed everything in my life, and I think sorry. It gave reality. And I think that's something that's very important in a world where there's been a lot of pain, there's been a lot of tragedy, especially now, I think those little moments sometimes have to make you believe that, you got to do the right things, you got to enjoy life, you got to value time, value the important things that are around you, especially family, especially friends, and not focus on the really kind of tiny things that don't matter anymore. Don't follow vanity the same way. Don't worry about the things where people are making judgments. Live your life. Focus on your life. Take advantage of the gifts that have been given to you or the gifts that have been instilled in you through wisdom and experience. I think that moment when I literally felt that last pulse go completely blew up my pulse into overdrive. And it was a really weird transition and very different from maybe what my mum might have felt. But it was something that I realized, my father would have grasped the same thing, and he did do that. And I really felt that kind of flow into me. So, yeah, that's definitely something I've not told the world before. Sorry.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I understand you got emotional. I appreciate that. Is it tough to let go of that mental component of that experience? How do you let that go out of your mind, or do you not let it go?
You definitely don't. I mean, I feel for you losing both parents. I struggled losing one, let alone two. I think, someone says, time heals all wounds. I hate to say it for anyone, and I wouldn't want to give false hope, but unfortunately, I don't really believe that. I think time makes you stronger to handle people and keep your kind of game face on, when in reality, you're a shattered, kind of mirror, you're a broken rose, you're the thorn in the rose afterwards. It's pain all the time. And I think, you've got to use it to a strength. Those things that can hurt you can make you stronger. And I think you've got to be strong mentally to say, no, dad wouldn't have wanted to see me like this, or dad wouldn't want to see me, doing absolutely nothing. Make something of your life and, keep his legacy alive through you, keep him alive through you. And I think in anyone's case, whether it's a parent, whether it's someone else, if you've got a strong figure in your life that's helped you in your life, when you look in the mirror, look for them, and realize, okay, they would have done this, I've got to do this. It doesn't have to be their way, but at least my way, but use their encouragement throughout. I don't think you will ever lose that pain, but I think it will make you stronger every single time that you feel it. You're different when you're in front of other people, but it's that unfortunately is life, and it's as the Lion King says, it's a way of life. It's something that we've all just got to accept sometimes. Value the time that we had.
Yeah, because we're all here on borrowed time. That's what I've learned out of this experience myself with grief, is to value the time, because you don't know when's your last day.
When did you lose your parents?
Well, my dad died at the very start of COVID, actually. He died
shame.
in March, and my mom died 8 years ago of breast cancer. So different components, but yeah, it's a different walk. It's a different walk when you're walking around. But I will say this time when my dad died, it was much easier for me to accept it and deal with it. I do think now that I've experienced that and growing through it. The
Yeah.
more you deal with these types of deaths that are close to you, you learn that life does go on. And I'm super spiritual. And I've just kind of handled things a little bit differently this time around. But I literally feel my parents' presence around me all the time.
No, and that's
Where
a
I'm not even
brilliant
just
point.
saying it. I mean, I really feel it.
Yeah. No,
And
I
it
think
makes you
that's
feel better.
powerful. It does. Yeah. It makes you feel like there is, something still around you and guiding you and there for you. I mean, the power of dreams is still incredible, something that I don't think any human will be able to really ever understand. But when you see them come into your dreams, it's amazing that they're somehow still there in some
Yes.
ways.
Yeah.
And I think those are very, very powerful.
Do you ever wonder what that's like? I wonder often what it's really like when you cross over. I mean, I know everyone has their own opinions of what happens, but I do know that I know for a fact that there's a spiritual alignment when someone passes and they're still present. That I know, and so it's interesting when you really think about it. Curious what your take is on that.
I would like to think that there is, that there's going to be a better place afterwards. And my father was wonderful at building. Well, yeah, his first part of his life was property development. He built, thousands of homes a year and offices and whatever. He was creating life.
Yeah.
He created a safari for animals, a home for us. I'd like to think that he's creating the next stage, for when we get there. Something. Maybe he went early because he's going to make something incredible. And I think. That would be a really nice little thing to take and hope that happens. And if there was a guy in the eulogy who left a really lovely message saying that your father simply left early to make heaven even better than what it's meant to be. And I
Say
think
that one more
it's
time. One more time, a little
it's
slower. Your father?
said your father left early to make
Mhm.
heaven even better than what it is.
Oh, I love
He'll
that.
be there waiting for you. And I think that was beautiful, and I think if that can give people hope, that's lovely, whether you believe in it or not, it can give you encouragement. And I don't fear death. I think before I did, but afterwards I haven't. I think it's, I'm so grateful for the life that I've had that if something did happen to me tomorrow, I'm very lucky for the life that I've lived. And I hope that there is something good afterwards. I don't know what it's meant to be. I'm not necessarily a religious individual, but I certainly have faith that there is something higher, there's something bigger than all of us. And I just hope that there is something much nicer afterwards. It's got to keep faith on that.
Well, before you go, what can we expect from you next?
Well, I mean, in terms of the book and the documentary, we're really trying to see whether people are wanting to actually get this into a series or a feature. There's been so many different discussions where I've kind of done the groundwork on the book and the documentary, and it would be very, very nice to see whether people want to make this into something bigger, tell a different story, bring it to the big screen, and something that is genuinely a really good story, something that's great for the world in terms of conservation and life and human interaction with wildlife, where it was a good sign versus the bad that we're so used to seeing on the news these days. So it would be great to see if we could work towards that. And anything afterwards, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, congratulations. You're going to speak all the wonderful positivity that you need going your way. Continue to flourish and blossom. And thank you so much for being here. I really, really, really appreciate the conversation.
No, I enjoyed it. It was such a pleasure. And thank you for taking your time. Some of the best questions I've had. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it. I did my research on you and I was honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Journey Told Show. I'm going to leave you with words that my father so often said to me, and that's to be the best you that you can be. Let that sizzle in your spirit. Until next time.